All right, welcome back, everybody. Today we're talking about Cardano. We're going to jump into some recent news that came out from the project. Then we're going to dive into chart analysis and then short and long-term price predictions. So let's hop right in. The first thing I want to bring to your attention is the fact that Cardano's recently reached about 900 projects built on the blockchain. So that includes DEXs, marketplaces, lenders, NFTs, etc. But just wanted to put that out there in terms of the most recent number of projects we've been able to track down that are actually on the Cardano ecosystem. The second thing I want to note, just to back this out a little bit, is the type of transactions that are occurring on Cardano. So we're seeing less and less simple transactions and more transactions that involved metadata and Plutus script interactions. So what this means is that developers are actually building more complex dApps, more complex interactions on Cardano. So not simply, send and receive contracts. These are contracts that are smart contracts executing on rules that they're given, and they're using that via metadata and Plutus scripts. So essentially, to kind of boil that down, it's developers creating more complex dApps, more complex interactions on the blockchain, which obviously means that they're working towards something bigger, which is great to see. The other thing that I would note, and this is probably, the number one piece of news that's come out from Cardano this week, is that the block size has been increased to 8 kilobytes, and that represents about a 10% increase in the size per block for Cardano. Now, this is huge news, but the countervailing argument is, hey, well, how does that compare with other layer ones? So namely Ethereum, right? Because Cardano is always the Ethereum killer. So I saw this interesting stat that kind of shows that even with Cardano's newest upgrade, with that block per size or size per block, increasing, we're still just short of half of the efficiency of Ethereum here in terms of kilobytes per second being able to be processed. So there is still room for Cardano to grow, and I think they will still add, continue to add to their block size. But at the same time, sometimes we need to pump the brakes in terms of the bullishness of announcements. Even though this is very bullish, it's fair to be bullish on this. I'm bullish on this news, but at the same time, kind of need to have this other countervailing point to that. The other thing I wanted to revisit is we had this crazy boom in transaction volume, specifically transactions over $100,000 on the Cardano blockchain in 2022. And I was very curious to see if this would actually maintain or at least, somewhat create a new bottom level for the amount of transactions occurring on ADA. And so I actually went and checked to see what was going on most recently here. So we can see that tweet was made when essentially this run was occurring, right? And what is interesting to me is that we didn't really see that, crazy spike in volume necessarily correlate with a price increase right away, right? And we actually saw it kind of delay. So as we saw, as this news started to break that these transactions were going crazy, we saw a little bit of a bounce here from ADA in mid-March. And then we kind of topped out here at about $1.20, $1.10 after coming back down. So it's definitely been interesting to see. It looks like maybe we could have potentially created a new bottom for expected transactions on ADA, which is obviously way better than what we were doing back here. But at the same time, you expect, with how much transaction volume we've seen here recently, why aren't we seeing the same correlation in price? So I don't have the answer to that question. I'd love to know. I have some theses, but at the same time, very interesting and very important to keep an eye on that in terms of overall transaction volume and activity on the blockchain. Last piece of news that is super, super important, the upcoming Vasil Hardfork. So this is expected to drop June, July timeframe. And what's hugely important about this is that it's going to be one of the biggest improvements to Cardano in its history. So it's mainly attacking 2 or 3 things. Basically, one would be allowing dApps to access transactional output without spending or recreating them. So that kind of takes away the 1 transaction per block complaint that we're hearing from dApp users on Cardano. And another one of the important ones is to facilitate on-chain storage of data for Cardano users. And then one of the last ones is upgrading to protect users from using Cardano held as collateral. So some big updates coming that are going to help developers and hopefully bring more developers to the blockchain. And what's interesting is that this will likely come out before the Ethereum merge. So there's a lot of speculation in terms of how this could affect the Cardano versus Ethereum environment. So really excited for this year in ADA. That wraps up the news. Let's hop into some chart analysis. So if you've been following ADA, obviously, like most cryptos, it's been a bloody few months here, since September all the way to now. We've lost nearly 75%. And obviously, that's not great, but we do have some good news in the fact that we were able to finally find a bottom here, and we broke out of this falling wedge here back in, looks like late March, last week of March. We see once we break above that trend line, we get that huge green daily candle confirming the breakout. We hop up here and we start to find some resistance, and now we've come back down. So what's really interesting to see as well is that we've actually, we're pretty much approaching actually oversold on the RSI. So that's down here. The oversold mark is at about 30. And you've seen that we've touched that a couple times, right? And essentially right when we've wicked down to our low before getting a little bit of an upwards movement, right? So we hit 30 here, we get an upwards wick right here. We hit 30 here, we get an upwards trend here. So what this tells me is that we probably still have a little bit of downward movement if we're going to tap that 30 mark on the RSI. But once we tap that, there's a decent chance that we get a nice daily green candle following that. But the other thing that's so critical, specifically right now of where Cardano is that it's actually battling a key support that was put in earlier in the chart. So if we look back here, back in February of 2021, so almost a year ago, actually more than a year ago. If we look back then, we put in this support after, and I'm gonna move this down a little so we can see. After this huge run up right here, we put in this critical support of about 80 cents ish, a little under 80 cents. And that acted as our base to then go forward. And now we had this for, almost entirety of 2021. We were able to stay pretty solidly above that line. Now, this is the first time since, 2021, essentially 2022 now, that we've had to rebattle and retest this support. So we were able to do it here. Now, the question is, we're about to kind of wick down and touch it here. The question becomes, are we able to bounce off of that? So we're battling a major fundamental support for the chart. And the problem with that is that could end up being a pretty big psychological barrier if we do not hold that support. Confidence is going to be lost, at least short term in the chart. So now that we have touched on some of the chart dynamics, essentially, I kind of want to get into some price targets. So if we pull up a fib retracement here, we can start getting an idea for what critical levels are. And you can see pretty clearly already, we've been having trouble getting back above this 100-day moving average. You can see we did it for about a week here, and then we fell back below. And once we actually confirm that below the 100-day, you saw these two big daily red candles coming back down. And now we're fighting for that, 78 cent, 75 cent support. And what my theory is kind of here, at least super short term, is if we don't hold that larger trend line that I indicated back here around 80 cents, if we do not hold that, we're likely falling down to 75 cents. And if we do not hold that, we could see price discovery in the downward direction, just because this would be the last fib support we'd have based on the retracement from our most recent high, and basically the all-time high for Cardano. So I would be very watchful for that 75 cent marker. We're going to see serious sell-off if we convincingly have multi-daily candles below that 75 cent marker. So that's the downside target to watch. In terms of looking to our upside, super short term, we have to not only recoup this and bounce, but we're gonna have to find a way to get on top of $1.30. $1.30 has been a nightmare, at least since the beginning of this year for Cardano. You can see we have a rejection here, a rejection here. We basically, you can make the argument, we try to go for it twice up here on this double tap. And you're seeing us get rejected over and over again on that 130. And you can also see once we were rejected from 160, we dropped through the floor. I mean, right through that $1.30 mark. No support here. We dropped 2 huge red candles there. So what that tells me is that this resistance is not going to be easy to reclaim. We even lost support here briefly back again in early January from that spot. So $1.30 is going to be really, really tough to reclaim. That's our short-term target. Past that, what we're looking for, because a $1.30 target will put us above that 100-day moving average. The next target of $1.65 would likely put us over that 200-day moving average, and then we'd be looking at some serious bullish momentum to the upside. So I believe that, if our next short-term target, obviously $1.30, if we're able to support on $1.30, I'd say we probably get consolidation between these two. And I'm actually going to delete some of these lines. I'm starting to draw a lot. Apologize, guys. So what I would contemplate seeing here is once we get up on $1.30, it's likely we'll see a decent amount of consolidation between $1.30, $1.65, just because of how tough we talked about these levels being. But once we get above 165 and confirm being above the 200-day, that could launch us into some serious, bullish momentum, right? Because being above that 100-day and 200-day moving average typically leads to quite the pump. So you can see right here, and then obviously back here it happened as well. So there's a chance we get some momentum from that. And in terms of people watching the chart, that would be a bullish indicator. But in terms of long-term targets, I speak with a lot of folks who own Cardano. I own Cardano. A lot of people are here for the long run. If we're talking long run, maybe in the next few years, I think ideally we're playing, somewhere between $3 and $4.50. I think $4.50 is in the next couple of years, possible, but at the same time, that's quite a hefty target for a coin that has such a high circulating supply. So we're going to need, a lot of these transactions to really start picking up to support that that larger circulating supply. So this is going to take a lot more transactions to reach a higher market cap than, let's say, Ethereum did back at this price, right? So there is just a lot to consider. I think $4.50 is kind of that super long-term target because it's our next high target after our previous all-time high. I think that could potentially be our next all-time high target, the $4.50 mark. The issue is there is just so much unknown, especially with Ukraine, Russia, inflation, and then also just can Cardano succeed with the Vasil Hardfork and everything else coming. But that is what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what other projects you'd like me to cover in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.